Good morning. I'm Alyssa Gable, and are you excited as I am for day 2 of our Girl Scouts Love State Parks weekend celebration? Thanks for joining us this morning. We are going to be doing a tour of Marblehead Lighthouse. So I have Kara with me. You can't see her right now. We're going to switch to her in just a second. But before I send it to Kara to give us this awesome tour, if you are a Girl Scout and want to let us know your name and where you're from, we would love to say hello to you. I have some people that are already written in the Q&A box there. I have Lila. Hi, Lila from Florida. Lily from Shelby, Ohio. We have Josie, Jenny, and Annie from State College, Pennsylvania. Hi, Scarlett from Houston. And Charlie, a Daisy from Maryville, Tennessee, Aubrey from Johnstown, Ohio. I can't read all of them, but we'll get some shout outs later. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to send it over to Kara to get started.
Hi, I'm Kara. I'm the naturalist at the Marblehead Lighthouse State Park, and as you can see, there is water right behind me. So we're actually at the top of the lighthouse, and Lake Erie is all behind me. So I'm going to show you a few things. So we just climbed 77 steps to the top. So that's how many steps it takes to get up here. So we're about 65 feet up, and I'll go over more of this stuff as well. So behind me, it's kind of hard to see. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Cedar Point. So all the roller coasters over there, if you're standing up at the top of the lighthouse, you actually can see quite a few of the roller coasters. So that's to the east. And we had some storms roll through, so you can kind of see over this way all the storms that are moving toward Cleveland, which is really neat. So Lake Erie actually creates storm systems, or with the warmer waters. A lot of times there will be water spouts that'll form right off this area. So if you look over here, you see the island. You see the island, okay? Right off behind me to the north, that is actually Kelly's Island. That's the largest island on the US side, Pelee being the largest island on the Canadian side of Lake Erie. So unfortunately, at the top of the lighthouse, we are not tall enough to actually see over Kelly's Island to see the Canadian island. So Middle and Pelee Island is directly behind Kelly's Island, and Kelly's is actually about 4 miles out onto the lake. And then if you look this way more, over the tree line to the west, you actually have South Bass and Middle Bass Island as well. So they look like one continuous island. You can see Perry's Monument back there. So people know South Bass Island as Put in Bay because that's actually the town on the island, and a lot of people go there to party. There's caves over there. There's the monument. There's actually a lot to do over there. And then back to Kelly's Island, there's actually a lot of trails. There's beaches. It's a state park over there as well. Now, I'll give you a view of kind of the state park itself. You see around. There is the keeper's house. It's not the original. The original house is actually 3 miles down the road. So this is some of the grounds. So this lighthouse is actually almost 200 years old. It was built in 1821. So in 2021, it'll be built 200 years ago. In 2022, it'll be actually in operation for 200 years. So it was put into operation in 1822. So it's almost 200 years old. And a couple of things with the lighthouse. These are actually vents right here. So a lot of lighthouses have foghorns, but this is actually just a vent because it gets very damp in there with the limestone. So as we're walking around, I will show you the light real quick if I do not lose service in here. And I'll reiterate and go over the different lights and things. So we're climbing up a ladder. So this is the LED that's actually up in the lighthouse now. It was on earlier because we did have quite a few storms rolling through. So this is the view from the top. completely top of the lighthouse. All right, sorry if I'm making everyone sick. So I'm climbing back down. So back out here, I wanted to mention, you can see this ferry boat out here. Sorry. It's bright orange, and that actually goes to Kelly's Island. So you can catch the ferries right out here in Marblehead and head over to Kelly's Island. About a half-an-hour boat ride. And then further down, there's other ferries that take you out to the other islands as well. And there's several other islands you actually can't see out here just because they're being blocked. Now, on to Jenna with some pictures. As we head down the stairs, it's a little slippery and I do not want to fall down the stairs, plus we lose service in here.
Hi there, so I'm Jenna Winters. I'm with ODNR as part of the Naturalist program, and like I said, Kara's going to be walking down a spiral set of stairs, and it's kind of hard to do that and juggle the camera and talk, so I'm going to take over for a brief minute and just show you some pictures. So as Kara mentioned, the lighthouse is almost 200 years old, and as you might expect, after 200 years, there were some cracks, there were some leaks, we had some problems with it, so last year, the lighthouse got a big renovation. It was really exciting. At the end of last summer, we closed the lighthouse down, and you can see in these pictures here, a company came in and put up scaffolding. And let me get to the next picture. And it is not showing up yet. Sorry about this. We're having a little technical problem here. The outside started cracking, so you see in the over on the left here where you can see some of the exposed brick, they basically chipped off all of the outside of the lighthouse, exposing the brick underneath. And if you look over the door on that smaller picture, you might be able to see a crack coming up. So that was the kind of thing that they were looking to fix. So they chipped off all of the white outside of the lighthouse and then put the scaffolding around. They had to wrap the entire scaffolding in plastic, and then they were able to put the coating back on. The reason they had to wrap it in plastic is because it takes a really long time for that outside mortar to dry. And if you remember the first thing Kara said to you, she said, if you look behind me, you can see water. So obviously the lighthouse is surrounded by Lake Erie. It's very wet there all the time. Not just from the waves coming up, but we also get a lot of weather there and a lot of storms. So the biggest problem with fixing the lighthouse and fixing the outside of it is getting it dry enough that the outside mortar could actually completely dry all the way through and seal the lighthouse off. So they had to leave it that way for many, many months. And they only had a small window of time where they could put the mortar back on, and then they had to leave it covered all winter until it got warm again next spring. When Kara gets down, she will be able to show you the new lighthouse. Sorry, I'm still trying to get the PowerPoint to work, and it just does not seem to want to. She's going to be able to show you what it looks like outside. It's beautiful now, bright white. Yes, Alyssa?
I was going to say, maybe if you try closing it and opening it back up, I don't know.
Yeah, it's really strange because it's here on my screen.
But it wasn't advancing on the live screen.
But it is not advancing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I see something different now.
Because I can click on it, but it won't.
Well, I do see that Kara is down from the lighthouse, so.
Is she there? Is she ready to go again?
Yeah, do you want me to send it to her?
Yeah, unmute yourself, Kara, and unfortunately the slideshow didn't work, so you're up again. You're on, Kara.
Hey, okay. I'm getting my slideshow ready to go. Oh no. Can you see it? Okay, so the Marblehead Lighthouse, you can probably see it behind me. It stands 50 feet tall. Can everyone?
We can see it.
You can see the PowerPoint, okay? So, all right, so we're going to go in. This is the location. So these are all the Great Lakes right here. And we are located right on Lake Erie. We're in the Western Basin. And this is part of the Great Black Swamp here. So it's kind of important because shipwrecks actually occurred quite a bit because this is the way people traveled. They didn't want to go through the swamp. They had to go around the swamp, and the best way to go around the swamp was right through Lake Erie, because you could curve right up around. Well, there's rocky shorelines everywhere. When we were up in the lighthouse, you probably could see the stone that was down below us. That was actually the limestone, Columbus limestone. So there's a lot of shipwrecks. There's like over a couple thousand shipwrecks, and people actually can go out diving and see these shipwrecks. There's some right off of Kelly's Island. Kind of what a swampland. So if you remember from yesterday's boardwalk tour at Maumee Bay, that's basically what the Great Black Swamp is. Just a big wet area with mosquitoes and animals, and it's just hard to walk through. So another little fact though about the Great Lakes, Lake Erie is actually discovered last by the French. So it's one of the last ones to be discovered. Here are some of the waves that you can see in Lake Erie. There can be some large waves. A lot of times they're about 5 to 6 foot. Definitely gets very rough because Lake Erie is very shallow. And when it's shallow, it kicks up pretty easily. So that's another reason that there is a lot of shipwrecks. So some facts. So the Marblehead Lighthouse is actually the oldest continuously operated lighthouse on the Great Lakes. So tonight that light will come on. Actually, this morning that light was on because it was storming. So that's what it's supposed to actually do. So it's supposed to guide people through the lake with the light. So when it gets dark enough, that light will automatically come on. So along with other lighthouses in the US, most of them have been automated. So you don't have to go out there, flip a switch, fill it with whale oil, or do whatever to get this thing lit. So it is fully automated, and if for some reason it gets cloudy again, which is turning out to be a beautiful day, that light will actually come on again. But the light is actually maintained by the U.S. Coast Guard. So basically the state takes care of the bottom part of the lighthouse and the park, while the Coast Guard comes out and they check that light up there. So like I had said, it's in the western basin of Lake Erie. So that red dot's actually where we are right now, the Marblehead Peninsula. So we're literally on a peninsula sticking out in the lake, and you can see all kinds of islands around us, Cedar Point, Sandusky, and everything else. So we are actually in an area called the Lake Erie Firelands. So I'll explain that a little bit. This kind of goes back into the history of everything. So with the Revolutionary War, so the British raids actually destroyed homes and properties in Connecticut. So they actually set a bunch of homes and land on fire. And when that happened, 500,000 acres of land, or they actually gave 500,000 acres of land to people in 1792 as reparations. So this was the area that they had them move to. So this is called the Lake Erie Firelands, if anybody ever heard that term. So once they moved here, and after the land was surveyed, and a lot of the native peoples were moved from the area for the people from Connecticut because their towns and houses were burned. And a lot of the town names around here, like Danbury, Norwalk, even Marblehead, because there's another Marblehead as well. So they took all those New England state names, and a lot of the towns here are named after that area. So why here? It's just they put them here because it was what they could do. But Lake Erie is the most dangerous of the Great Lakes due to its shallow waters and sudden storms. Because of the water being so shallow and so warm that it does create its own storm system. So you'll get squalls out there. The waves will kick up. You'll get 5 to 6 foot waves, like I said, even higher than that. It's very muddy. There's a lot of rocks out there, and that was the reason why they wanted to put this lighthouse in. So the peninsula, like I said, has a rocky shoreline and a depth of only 10 to 12 feet, even further away from shore. So even out there, like between here and Kelly's Island, the 4 miles, it isn't like 10 to 12 feet deep. It's not very deep out there. And also the Lake Erie Islands actually affect the conditions on the water. Like I was talking about, there are water spouts that form quite a bit between here, Cedar Point here, and Kelly's Island as well. And this picture right here is actually Lake Erie and all the shipwrecks on Lake Erie. So there are so many just on Lake Erie alone. So, U.S. Congress.
Hey, Kara.
Yes.
Sorry, before we move on, can you explain what a water spout is for our viewers?
So basically a water spout is a tornado that forms over water. Sometimes they touch down, other times they're just a funnel cloud out there, but they are literally a water tornado. And they can sink boats, they can dump water on boats. So, and it doesn't even have to be storming. It'll be a day like today, cooler air, warmer water, and they just form. And this actually around here, this is kind of around a good time to see them. Actually, last month they had record-breaking water spouts all over Lake Erie and a lot of the Great Lakes. So, moving on with how the U.S. Congress had put $5,000 toward the construction of the light in 1819 because there was definitely a need for it with the rocky shorelines. So they got a contractor, William Kelly, and another guy and his 12-year-old son. They actually constructed this lighthouse in 11 weeks. But mind you, this lighthouse was only 50 feet tall and made of solid limestone. So it did not look like this at all. It literally did not have that upper lantern house, that upper part of it. It was 50 feet. Where that ring is right there was the original height, and it was all white and just solid limestone. But it only took 11 weeks. So there's been controversy or debate on where the limestone came from, because on this property, there are some trails that are in front of me, and it looks like there is actually a small quarry. And a lot of people think, why work harder than you have to, and you get the limestone right from that small area. So there's controversy because it was private lands and different things at the time, but why work harder than you have to? But the limestone is definitely from the area, whether it was right in the park here or maybe down the road. So the base of the lighthouse is 25 feet in diameter, and the base, like the walls, are 5 foot thick. So it is a pretty solid lighthouse, and it tapers off to 12 feet at the top. So, as I was saying, the Marblehead Lighthouse was constructed out of native limestone, and it actually was used to build many structures in the area. So there actually was a limestone house here on the property as well. So the first lighthouse keeper, Benijah Wilcott, his wife really didn't like it because limestone's very damp, it's cold, it's awful. But they did have a house 3 miles down the road that I had mentioned as well. That's the house they stayed in the winter time because there was no need to light the lighthouse when the lake was frozen. So they stayed there, and then they lived in the house over here, and then this was built later on. This house was built later on. So if anybody has actually been over this way, you will see the Marblehead, like the quarry. It is huge. And it's one of the largest exporters of limestone in Ohio. So you'll be out here, you'll hear sirens go off, and you will feel and hear the blasting. So if you're not used to it, you think it's an earthquake or something bad's happening, but it's literally they're blasting the limestone over here. And limestone is actually relatively hard, but it does hold a lot of moisture. And it contains many minerals, and it's often used in concrete. So the Marblehead Lighthouse has had 15 lighthouse keepers and assistant keepers before the Coast Guard actually took over in 1946. And there's actually 2 female lighthouse keepers on the Great Lakes, and I'll explain that. Keepers were in charge of maintaining the light. So not only did they maintain the light, they actually kept logs of ships, the weather patterns, and they set up rescue efforts as well, because they were the lifeline out here. There was not a life-saving station. There wasn't anything. They were the lifeline out here. So there was the lighthouse keeper, Benijah Wolcott. He became the first keeper in 1822 when the lighthouse was open, and he actually died of cholera. So we're going to get into that a little bit. So this area had an outbreak of cholera. So it's from drinking contaminated water. You literally get diarrhea, stomach cramps, and you will die from it. Nowadays, if you got cholera, it's not a death sentence, but back then they didn't know exactly what the cause of it was, and people died. So what had happened was, over around Sandusky and different areas, people were dying like crazy from cholera. So they just started throwing the bodies in the lake because it's the easy way to get rid of them. Well, what goes out must come back in. So right around the shoreline, and even in this park, there were cholera-ridden bodies washing up on shore. So Benijah and his son had to clean them up, and coming in contact with them, they actually both passed away from cholera. And so his wife, Rachel, Benijah's wife, Rachel, took over, and she did everything that he did until she remarried. So there's actually a cemetery over in Sandusky. There's like over 300 some people buried there from cholera. Now, moving on, after all that, in the winter, I did mention this earlier, they lived in a that other limestone house that is actually a few miles away. It's the oldest residence in actually Ottawa County, and you can visit it. It's a museum. So when Benijah, actually back to Benijah and what he did about taking care of the light, every night he had to carry 2 40-pound buckets of whale oil to the top of this lighthouse. Mind you, I had mentioned it was 50 foot tall and solid limestone, but there was a wooden staircase in there, which I will show the newer one, but at the time it was a wooden like ladder type staircase. And he had to carry these 2 40-pound buckets of whale oil every night up to the top to light these 13 lamps. And I couldn't imagine, it probably didn't smell good. It was heavy, and whale oil was very expensive, especially since we don't have whales out in Lake Erie. Like, this is not the ocean. They had to import all this, and it was very expensive. So they did end up switching to like kerosene and lard and other things like that. But I can't even imagine carrying lard up to the top of the lighthouse, because that just sounds like it would smell awful as well. So in 1858, moving on with the lights, they were replaced by a 3rd order fixed Fresnel lens. The lens used a single lamp, therefore less fuel is less expensive. So this lens in this picture is actually 1,400 pounds. So it is one heavy, solid light of glass and metal. So as I had mentioned, the lard oil and whale oil was replaced by lard in 1866 and then kerosene in 1880. And then around 1900, a rotating 3.5 order Fresnel lens was actually installed with a clockwork mechanism that had to be cranked every 3 hours. So they had to be out here all night long, every 3 hours cranking this until the lake. And beside if you see the Fresnel lens in the picture up there on the right, there's this green light that was put in later, and you can't see it that well, but this lighthouse actually acts as a large lightning rod, so you don't want to be in it. It has been struck several times and melted the outer casing of some of these newer bulbs. So in 1923, the light was actually switched to electric and a halogen bulb. And then in 2012 is when the lighthouse was an automated LED light. So that's what I actually showed you up there. So this light actually flashes green every 6 seconds. You can see it 11 nautical miles out, which is actually equal to 13 statute miles. And how I had mentioned Kelly's Island's about 4 miles out. If you can imagine 9 miles past that, you can still see the light shining out there on the lake, and you're almost actually at the Canadian border, which is about 15 miles out on the lake. Sometimes when you climb to the top of the lighthouse too, you'll get a text message saying welcome. And you might ask, why is it green? Because it used to be actually a white rotating light, but it actually interfered with the airports around here because there's several little airports on the islands. There's one in Catawba. So with the white spinning light, the pilots were confused. So they switched it to green. So if you ever go to different lighthouses, each lighthouse has its own sequence of what color it is and how many seconds it flashes. So this one is 6. Every 6 seconds, it'll flash 1 second of green. Other lighthouses may be white and maybe, let's say, 7 seconds or 4 seconds. So that's how you can tell on a nautical chart too. They have that listed, and you can tell where you're at by the flashing of the lighthouse. Now on to the houses that they lived in. I did mention the keeper's house, the new keeper's house. I did pan over there. The new keeper's house was replaced. The original limestone structure that was back on the property in 1880, and it was demolished. And then actually there was an addition onto the house that housed keeper's family and the assistant and keeper's family as well. So there was actually like an apartment in the top of it, and someone lived in the bottom of it as well. And I wanted to move back to the light again. So there was an addition done. Oh, here we go, the addition. So I had mentioned we moved to the LED, but there was a point where the Fresnel lens was. So from 1897 to 1903, the tower was renovated and there was brick interior added. So there's actually a brick wall inside of there that was never there before. So they added that in 1897. So they almost built a lighthouse within a lighthouse. And there's actually an alcove where they can store stuff now. And there's a cast iron staircase that's in there. So that is still well over 100 years old, that staircase. Not the original one. I don't think we'd want the wooden one because with how damp it is in there, it probably would have rotted away right now or by now. So the 15-foot addition to the top included a watch room and a lantern room. And the lens was switched to a larger rotating Fresnel lens during the renovation as well. But that's no longer in there anymore.
Why did they have to add the bricks?
They had to actually add the bricks, so I didn't mention that. So to add the height to the platform, the Fresnel lens was so heavy that they actually had to put the bricks in there because limestone, it is strong, but it's crumbly at the same time. So they needed that extra strength to hold that heavy light up there. So what you didn't see in the video, because there was no service in there, is the 77 cast iron stairs that were added. And they actually had a pulley system at one point that ran through. Remember how I was saying every 3 hours they had to rotate the Fresnel, or they had to crank it to rotate the Fresnel lens. So it ran through the staircase. So that is the spiral staircase, 77 to the top, and those are the bricks that I was talking about. There actually was like a whitewash, so it was actually completely white in there at one time. Here's another shot looking in the door. So I was talking about the alcove. So to the right, you do have the alcove. And if you ever come here on a tour, we do have a light in there, and you can look up and you can see almost up to where they did the renovation at the 50-foot part. And you can see way up in there, and it's really cool. But those are the stairs, and they're a tight spiral cast iron staircase. The lighthouse through the years. In 1885, that is what it looked like. It was that 50-foot solid limestone structure. There really wasn't hardly any windows in it. It was small. It didn't have the bricks or anything. So then through the 40s and the 60s, it kind of looks like what it does now. Except for the windows, the bricks weren't exposed by the windows. And then later on, that's still an older picture toward the end there. So during World War II, so there's a lot of war history. There's a lot of history in this area. So during World War II, the lighthouse was actually declared to have strategic importance for national defense. So they could climb up there and they could look across the lake and keep a watch. So they actually added a watch room off to the side. As you can see over there, it's no longer up there. But they did have an observation platform on the tower, but it was later removed. So The Marblehead Lighthouse actually became a state park in October of 1998. The reason being, maybe not the reason, but what had happened was they were actually going to burn this keeper's house and use it for fire training, and then the lighthouse was going to be knocked down because it wasn't able to be maintained at one point. They were going to knock it down and put in one of those metal towers that, like you see on South Bass Island by their old lighthouse, that's what would have been here. So they were going to use this as training. So there's the ground. The grounds has the tower, which is the lighthouse, the keeper's house, the life-saving station, and the carriage house. They're all maintained by the state now, but like I said, the upper part of the lighthouse, the light, is maintained by the Coast Guard. So they'll come out once a year, check that light, maybe wipe up the windows because there's a lot of bugs, you know, birds fly by and things hit the windows when they fly by.
Hey, Kara.
Yes.
Caitlin wrote in and she was wondering why it's called Marblehead Lighthouse.
Well, because this is the town of Marblehead, and when when I was talking about the Lake Erie Firelands and when the people moved here, that was one of the towns over in that area, and they brought that name over here. So then they named it the Marblehead Lighthouse, just because it's the town that it's in.
Okay, thank you.
So, if you ever want to come on a tour here, the tours to the top of the lighthouse run every day of the week from noon to 4, Memorial Day to Labor Day. So the tours are $3 a person, unless you're 5 and under. So what we usually stand at the base of the lighthouse, do a history and safety talk, and then you actually get to walk up to the top. So you have almost like 15 to 20 minutes to view and walk around up there. So the state park naturalists and experienced volunteers usually are the ones who give the tours every 20 minutes in that time frame. And you can see in this picture, this lady is thoroughly enjoying taking pictures up there because it is beautiful. So the view, we did go over the view a little bit. It was hard to see because everything is small up there. It's better in person. So if you ever get out here, definitely get out here. So the visitors at the top of the light can see Cedar Point, like we tried to show you, Kelly's Island, South Bass and Middle Bass Islands, and much of Sandusky on clear days. And actually on a super clear day, if you have binoculars, you could see Avon. So that's almost near Cleveland on a super, super clear day, but you can't have any humidity. So Pelee Island and Middle Island, North Bass Island aren't visible. And then Johnston's Island is actually up and around. You can't see that as well. We're just not quite tall enough. But here at the bottom of the page on the left is actually a really good shot of Cedar Point. So it's a beautiful view, and a lot of times you can see the coasters running. You can see a lot of the rides running. And then there's another picture too of Perry's Monument. If you ever go up in Perry's Monument on South Bass Island on Put in Bay, you will see many of the Canadian islands because you are definitely pretty high up in there. So there's also the museum, which was the old keeper's house, one of the keeper's houses. It's renovated, it's filled with displays, and it's actually free to go in, and it has history of the area, and their operation of hours are actually the same as the lighthouse tours. And they actually, in 2016, they added the U.S. Coast Guard life-saving station, so it is like the original, but it's not, it's a replica. And actually has a rail on the back of it, like when they used to take the lifeboats and throw them out in the water. It's pretty cool if you get to look in there, and it's actually free as well to walk through there. So the building is open during regular lighthouse hours, and is free to the public to roam around in there as well. So those are some pictures of the life-saving station and the Coast Guard, the life-saving boat as well. And here's the backside. I was talking about the rail. That's what they used to do, is they used to run the boats out because they had to rescue people. Lake Erie was very rough. Oh, and another cool thing, ice shoves. So several years ago, there were ice shoves literally around this peninsula, and they're caused by freezing and thawing on the lake, and it causes ice slabs to break apart, and when the waves and wind come together, it pushes them up, and they were up over 30 feet tall out here, and they get this brilliant, the pictures don't do it justice, it gets this brilliant blue color. So if it ever happens, you have to come out and see this. People climb all over them. It's so cool. So you can get an idea of what it looks like in that picture. It's very cold out here, very, very cold out here in the wintertime though. Oh, on to the renovations. So last year, it was September 3rd, in the fall of 2019, renovations actually began on the exterior of the tower. So it needed repairing. There was water getting in the gunite, which is like a stucco layer. It needed painted, definitely needed painted, and the windows needed resealing, and there was some point and tucking done. So what they did is they actually put a bunch of, oh my gosh, scaffolding. I couldn't even think of the word scaffolding around the tower is what you see there. It actually looks kind of cool. And then what they had to do is they actually had to wrap the lighthouse, because what had happened was it gets cold here. It starts getting real cold, and with the stucco or the gunite, it would not dry properly unless there was enough heat in there. So what they did is they put the salamander heaters in there, and they put all that plastic around the scaffolding to try to keep in the heat, so that would dry properly. This is what it looked like after they took some of the stuff off, because they ended up having to wait a little bit. It was just too cold. All the heat was escaping out the top of the lighthouse as well, because you saw that was all open up there. So that's what it looked like. That is the exposed limestone underneath there. That is it. These are a couple of the pictures. I think Jenna was trying to show these earlier. Here's some of the waves you can see some of the waves. Some winter pictures of the Marblehead Lighthouse. A bald eagle that photobombed the lighthouse. Beautiful rainbow as well with the Marblehead Lighthouse, because we get all the storms. Here's just another one of an exposed picture of the moon. Now this is what it looks like at night, or this was actually it was dusk. That's what the green light actually looks like when it turns on. So it's just a solid green light. It doesn't rotate or anything, but it is beautiful. Here is a picture overlooking the lighthouse. There's a lot of sailboats out that day, and a lot of people actually like to fish out here. So on any given day, you will see a lot of boats out there, people fishing, jet skis, everything else. And sometimes, actually, if you look over the edge, you can see schools of fish down along the rocks as well. There is a good shot of Cedar Point across the lake.
Kara, the slides have gotten a little bit behind you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, still show. Okay, now we're looking at Cedar Point.
Okay. So yes, there is Cedar Point right there. You can see that clear as day from the top of the lighthouse. You see the dragster, that tall coaster, and then over to the right, you have the Millennium Force. Here's a nice winter shot of the lighthouse as well. This was before the renovation. You can see it's a little bit darker and needs some new stucco, but it's a beautiful, beautiful place out here in the wintertime. Oh, and this is just a goofy picture of the lighthouse way, way back in the day, the original photo. I'm just kidding. But there are dinosaurs roaming around in this picture. Here's another one of like the Milky Way and the lighthouse. Is another gorgeous shot of the light on as well. And here, they're actually starting a ground break, because if any of you have ever been here, there are pit toilets, and no one likes pit toilets. They're pretty bad. So there's groundbreaking. The bathrooms are actually coming along quite nicely. There's still a little bit to do. But actually, if I take the laptop and can everyone see that okay over there, that building over there? There are the new bathrooms started, so no more pit toilets out here. That's what it's supposed to look like. It's going to have a black roof, not a red roof anymore. So the Marblehead Lighthouse is actually known as the most photographed site in the state of Ohio, just because of the gorgeous lake views, the lighthouse, just everything. Thank you.
That was awesome, Kara. We have some questions that came in, so I'm going to just give some shout outs of the girls that we missed earlier, and then I'm going to go back to you for questions. But I wanted to thank, we have Tinsley from Minnesota, Samantha from Pennsylvania, also from Pennsylvania, Leah and Lindsay, and we have some Ohio girls too, Haley Brownie from Central Ohio, Ainsley from Twinsburg, Ohio, Kaylee from Brunswick, Ohio. Thank you all for joining us. We even have Corrine all the way from California. It's got to be early there, Corrine. Normally our West Coast viewers don't come on until a little bit later, so thanks for spending your morning with us. We also have Blair from Arkansas, Aurora from Indiana, Riley from Virginia, Elena from North Carolina. But I want to get to your questions that some of you had asked. So let's see. Where do we start? So Kara, somebody wrote in and asked, can you see the effect of tides in the Great Lakes?
So there is a slight tide, but it's not like the ocean. It's like centimeters, if anything. Now we get like little bit of rip tides from waves and things, but not actual tides from the moon, like in the ocean.
I have another question for you, Kara. You mentioned earlier that, so this is Jenna. You mentioned earlier that it was $3 to take a lighthouse tour for people who are over 5. Can you tell our viewers where that money goes? Because I think that's pretty important.
Well, okay, yes, that is very important. So a lot of that money, it really goes, that restroom project that they are doing right now to help renovate different things here as well. There's other plans to add different sidewalks to make it more ADA accessible and things like that. But the money did definitely, a lot of it went to build these new restrooms that are being put in. And to maintain the lighthouse as well, of course.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Lighthouse Society?
Well, they are a group of people that actually volunteer. They work in the oh my gosh, the life-saving station, the museum as well. So there's a little gift shop in there, and they'll give people tours or answer questions in there. They actually help us as well as giving the tours and money collection out here as well. So they set up different things and help out, and they're the ones who have been using the money to build the restrooms and come up with different renovations here at the park as well.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, because I think that's a pretty neat partnership between the state and a local group. So another question we have is, Anna wants to know, is 50 feet considered a small lighthouse?
Considering, yes, there are lighthouses that are way taller than that. This is a smaller lighthouse, but there was no need for it to be any taller. So if it was any taller, then it would shine way into Canada, and there really was no need for it to be that tall. But it's a little bit on the smaller side. But we're on the Great Lakes, not the ocean, so there's really no need for it.
Okay, speaking of being on the Great Lakes, are there other question? I'm trying to remember who asked this. This was Riley from Virginia. She wants to know, do the other Great Lakes have lighthouses?
Oh yes, there's many lighthouses along the Great Lakes. You can actually, especially up in Michigan, all the Great Lakes along there, there are so many lighthouses. You can go on tours and see them. And there's even some right here too. Toledo Harbor Lighthouse is not far. Then you have Lorraine and stuff. So we have lighthouses close to us right here as well.
And isn't there a place nearby where they can see a lens up close?
Yeah, so actually right in the museum, the lens is right in there, and it's 1,400 pounds. This thing is huge. They actually had to put braces in the basement so this thing wouldn't go through the floor because it is that big. Nice.
All right, this one I feel like this is kind of Jeopardy for you, like Lighthouse Jeopardy is to see how much you know. Haley wants to know what the circumference of the lighthouse is.
Oh, well, I mean, the base is 25 feet, so That's a good one. I honestly,
I'm impressed that you knew that, because I was like, ooh, I don't know the answer to this one.
that's a good one. I'll have to get back to you on that one. But I know it's definitely 25 feet at the base, but that's not answering the question.
It might be. Well, no, that's a start, because at least we know that, and we can see by looking at it that it gets skinnier. So it might be kind of neat to find out what the circumference is at the top of it. So thank you for that, Haley, because we're always really curious about these things, and we're going to have to find the answer to your question. So, Kara, a little while ago, you talked about the lighthouse during the World Wars, and that there was the observation deck on the side. Why did they take that off?
After the war, there was actually no need for it anymore, so they've removed it. It would have been cool if it was kept up there and we could walk in it, but yeah, after the war, there was no need for it. And once they did some other renovations, like maybe when they repainted and did stucco, they just took it off of there.
I'm pretty sure you said this, but Abby had asked earlier how tall it was.
It's about, where we were standing on the platform, we were at 65 feet. So the very top, it's like upwards at 80 to the top of the lightning rod. But we were standing about 65 feet up. It was originally 50. Like I had said in the beginning, it was originally 50 feet tall, so it was a small lighthouse.
That white ring.
The white ring, if you can see the ring behind me, was the original height of the lighthouse.
Okay. So this was a question just by someone anonymous, but when you talked about all the changes that they've done with it and the renovations and the observation platform being there and now not, why did they change the location of the windows? Do you know?
Well, when they added the 15 feet to the top, the way when they put the stairs in, it's just the way they had to put. That's a good one. Just the way they did it when they put the stairs in, basically, because there's window wells in there as well for them to access and look out, and because there wasn't very many windows in there in the first place, so they probably wanted more light. And yeah.
Okay, so probably just what they needed at the time then.
They needed at the time, yeah.
Another question we've got, also just anonymous. You said originally that the house was built out of limestone and the tower was built out of limestone. Where did they get that from?
So there is debate on whether it came from the property right behind us, because if you walk on the trails, there's actually, it looks like a small quarry, and it looks like there's a track system as well on the limestone itself, like where they would drag it out with. But this whole area is nothing but limestone. So the limestone did come from within this area, because back in the day, there was no reason to work harder than you had to. They didn't have the equipment to bring all that in. So it was either right on the property, pretty much on the property here, or it was right in the area. When we were up in the lighthouse, you could see the limestone all along the shorelines, and it actually comes up through the ground. So it is like the soil here is almost all limestone. There's really not much soil, it's limestone. So
cool.
They utilize that.
All right, so one final question coming in from Annie. What animals can you see around the lighthouse?
That is a good question. So we have a lot of fox squirrels that run around here, and it's really entertaining because we have red-winged blackbirds, and they like to attack and dive bomb the squirrels and the people that walk through here. We also have barn swallows. They actually started on their migration, though. They usually hang all over the keeper's house. There are northern water snakes, which you'll see them basking on the rocks, and double-crested cormorants, so they almost look like a loon. So a lot of people ask, hey, are there loons around here? Possible, but not really likely. So you will see the double-crested cormorants, and they're divers. So all of a sudden they'll just dive underwater and they'll pop up somewhere else. Sometimes you'll see white bass swimming around the rocks when you're up at the top of the lighthouse. Bald eagles. We saw a couple bald eagles just this morning before we started this fly over the lighthouse. Great blue herons. Turtles. I've seen painted turtles out here. Toads will be jumping around. Garter snakes. There is plenty of wildlife out here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kara. We are out of time for our lighthouse tour this morning. Coming up next, if you want to stay with us, we are going to go to Salt Fork State Park with naturalist John Hickenbottom and talk about hummingbirds. So thank you all very much, and we hope we'll see you here in a few minutes on our next webinar. Bye.